where I come from. I went to a school. When I started a school in a church house, thatched church house. I was young. My elder brothers in 1960, they went to build a thing that was called school. Thatched roof building. This is 1960. It took many years that from that town, except for me and my brothers, 2 or 3 of my brothers, who had gone to secondary school, every other child in that village had not gone to secondary school. I returned to the village when I came from exile in 2000. Sorry, not 2000, in 2003. Now count the years. I got back there in that village, and the thatched roof house that my brothers built, that we used to learn ABC, today, that time when I went back in 2003, that thatched house that we had before was much better than the thatched house that the kids are still using. And then you ask, how come children come from that village and are angry? They come to Monrovia to go to school. They are back in West Point, New Crew Town, Sonnywe, Claratown, Door Community, and I just named them. That's where they live. When they come to Monrovia, they go to no school because they have no school to go to. They have no money to go to school. That is why you have somewhere called New Crew Town. There are Crew people of all sorts that came from Grand Crew, and you say there's no population in Grand Crew. Why did they leave? If there was school there, they wouldn't have left. You ask how they come, and so many of them from Sino, they're there in Claratown, in this and that. The reason why they came, they were coming for opportunities. They didn't find the opportunities, and therefore are available. They are called the hoi polloi. They are called the lumpen proletariat. They sit there doing nothing, waiting for an opportunity to come in the street. And you say they are bad. Some of them become thieves. What do you want them to do? I'm saying those kids from TRC would not come if at least a school had been built. If there had been a high school in the community, because I had to leave my parents when I was a little child to go to Harper City, stayed with some people carrying chimney buckets, if you know what I mean. Many other children don't do that. The son of a paramount chief will go carry chimney bucket for somebody. No, my mother didn't want to hear that, but I persisted. But I became one of those who passed through the cracks. My elder brother had to leave school to work so that I would continue school and come to university. I'm saying to you, unless we ensure a certain type of distribution, we will not have the doors, because Doe would never have left Tucson if you were there until you finish high school. Then he will have a certain tampering of mentality that if somebody were to tell him to make a coup, whatever his color of skin was, he would think twice. I'm saying to you that the change we're speaking about is that change that ensures that there are schools everywhere, that there will be clinics and hospitals, and that when people cut their timber, the forests that have been protected by their communities for such a long time, the benefits of that forest will be seen by them. That you will leave Monrovia and go as a tourist to River G, and you will sit by the riverside and enjoy yourself in a nice hotel.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. You're saying that we must see justice, but it must be a well-rounded issue of justice, not just political, but economic, spiritual, and in a way that there can be equity and balance for everybody. In that kind of change, we can see a better society. Okay. I hope we can have people who can take responsibility to do that. Next, a question is concerned about this justice. You know, in a case where a nation has gone through such turbulent change, where the whole structure of the society has broken down, how do we deal with this factor of justice? Because under normal condition, justice is normal to take out the criminal element and isolate them so that the system continues to function under the rule of law. But where the whole nation goes through a turmoil, where there's no more rule of law, and the whole system has become a failed state, we need to now develop new terminology and new methodologies for dealing with this kind of situation. So I want to ask you a question. How should justice judge the consequence of violent political struggles which completely destroys a nation? Should we talk about who struck first? Was the first to strike? Or should we talk about shared responsibility and amnesty, forgiveness, as we have done in our Liberian situation? What would be your input to this kind of argument or discussion?
Well, I've been part of this debate, as you well know, that I was a signatory to the Comprehensive Peace Agreement in Accra. I took part in the meetings, and a year earlier, the meetings that led to that discussion in Accra. I chaired the Liberia Leadership Forum, worked with others to create it, and did the meetings in Ouagadougou. That was actually the bedrock of the meeting in Accra. This discussion came up, and there were the extremes that said we must have a war crimes court for those who we say committed atrocities. And at the time of the discussion, there was indeed atrocity being committed. Monrovia was being rained of shells. And there were others who said, let's leave everything to God. We do nothing. We all go and leave it. The compromise was, we will leave it to God, but let's have an opportunity for what we have now, the TRC. Mr. Commissioner, I wager that, the process of looking for or ensuring justice is not going to be a one-day affair. I think the first thing is for all of us to believe that it is possible. We must not give up. It seems to me that when we elected, we did an incredible thing. We elected a woman as a president. Yet again, Liberia set an example to the world, that in Africa is possible. If we could take that decision, which my father in the first instance had difficulty with, say, a woman president, can you imagine? She's not a member of the society push. She's not there. She can't come to the men society to talk. How can she be president? But before it was over, he realized that it was possible. I'm saying that it is possible if Rwanda can do it. If some other countries in Africa, in Mauritius, in Tanzania, in other countries, they are putting into place systems. I say we must agree by national ownership, building systems that we can then force everybody, not by physical force, but getting them to appreciate, own up, and know that there is something good about paying taxes, for example. The president doesn't have to tell you. Just know that it is right to pay taxes. So you yourself will go and fix your tax records. Then you will know that when you are giving public funds, or you are in charge of public funds, that something should prick your conscience to say, I shouldn't take it for myself, because it will affect some others. If you are in these various agencies of government, I listened to the president this morning talking to her party people, and she says, if you say you are a member of the Unity Party, then you must set yourself to the highest standards, because she has fired one of the assistant ministers, who is one of our active youth leaders. I don't know whether it may imprint on many people's minds. She says she would do it on anybody. Because she is human, there must be people to praise her and not come and say, oh, woman, hey man, you gotta be a mother, the late child, so and so. It doesn't mean when you sack that person, you will go and kill them. We provide opportunity for them to get reformed. Nobody should kill them. The fact that today we can come and say whatever we wish is a major step. I think if we build systems, then it will not be left to the whims and caprices of the leader, because the system will compel certain things to happen. So to answer your question, I say this is what we need to do. We need to concentrate on building of the systems. Our friends who come, the international community, I think we should judge their effectiveness by how early they can help us build systems, and not how they justify their continuing stay. Is how they can help us build systems that Liberians will manage and be in the driver's seat.
So, in summary, what I'm understanding from the question I asked is that justice can only be the way we've dealt with it by this general type of TRC process, a general type of forgiveness of the past, but with the focus of trying to understand the root cause so that recommendations can be carried forth that will be able to implement a better system that will protect against the future repetition is in essence the best way, as compared to trying to deal with holding people of the past responsible now and deal with the old concept of justice when it's already a failed situation. You know, because that was the part of my question I've given to you. I mean, what about these people who have already done these bad things? Should we still hold them responsible while we are still building our new system? Or should we just, you know?
I think the emphasis, you see, I keep saying about end. What is the end result? Why do we do all of this? This TRC process, the objective is not to hold people. The objective is to build a future for our children and our children's children. So the only time we hold somebody is if a man comes here before you and fail to tell the truth, and on top of that lie so much that leads to lack of reconciliation. That means such a person needs to be held so they cannot contaminate other people.
Thank you. That's very clear. Okay, the next one is a comment on the so-called check and balance role of the legislature, especially with your background having served in the legislature, and why Liberia's legislature has not been able to fulfill its role in check and balance, particularly for the period. I don't want you to focus so much on the period prior to 1980, because your general answer will probably be, you know, it was just part of that corrupt one-party system of the 100-year rule of the three-party. But let's look at after that now. Since 1980 to the 2003, the normal system of check and balance is that legislature should be composed of the wise men representing their people in such a way that executive leaders cannot become dictators that destroy their country, and that judicial cannot be unfair, and that things will be sort of kept into balance. But we see in our system, it didn't really work. So can you give us some comment on this, and what has been our problem with this, and what has been your learning experience being a member of the legislature, and what do we look forward to now in the future?
Mr. Commissioner, I like us to remember that part of democracy is representation. The legislature is a representative of the people, those we elect. So, if you have a group of thieves and they want a representative, they will elect a thief, because you want representation. When in the transitional period, we're looking for the 76 members of the transitional legislature, the armed groups, each armed group was supposed to nominate some people, and each nominated the people who they believe who carried out their agenda. It was their representatives. Civil society, who I represented, our elections and elected me. They thought that I would be their best representative. There were human rights groups, pro-democracy organizations, and I believe that they probably thought that I would do it for them. I'm only saying that as we try to find good legislatures, we will do a lot among ourselves in the quality of people we develop. so that when they are voting, they will vote for those who will represent them. The first step is that we agree that there will be representation. I've always said it's a mistake to say the legislature is the place for all wise men. No. The legislature is a place for representatives of the people. So, if people from River G, for example, or one constituency there elect a given person, at the given historic juncture, based on their understanding, this is the person they think is their best representative. It's not that they're stupid, it's just at that point in time. But the more they get informed and the development level increases, when they start having development, there are more schools, more economic activity, you will see who they will elect. They might not elect the same person, or the person will keep pace, change as well, and they will elect that person, and the legislature will be different. I don't want to accuse our legislature as you know, they just happen to be representatives of those who elected them at this point in time. It may get better the more we have more informed electors.
I appreciate that very much, and it's a very clear presentation. But then it starts me thinking then, because we're concerned about protecting the future of this country, and we are to make recommendations to the government that will provide that kind of hope. So as we see that we have representatives and we have senators, and the representatives, as you say, are duly meant to represent the people, and we can't speed up the level of where the people are today. Where they are today is where they are. We have to accept that. So whatever representative they bring or elect, we just have to accept that. But then wouldn't it be interesting that an idea of making reforms for the Senate so that it could be composed of not just people representative, but people who can provide a balance to the whole system of the legislature, in the sense of maybe spiritual leaders, businessmen, people of renowned wisdom, that would provide that temperament to the give and take action between the House and the Senate as a whole. What would you have any comment on that thought? It's just a proposal I'm looking at from my own personal view.
Many countries have used different ways by which they ensure national representation. There are some who make room for marginalized minorities who, because they are minority, they will never have enough representation, but they make sure that they get there. There are those who say, for example, we have to ensure that we have X number of women, because the culture at the moment does not allow, the people will not vote for women anyway. Those who say we have disabled, we must have a certain percentage. Each country, each society, as a result of their own development, their own experiences, have put into place a constitutional process. I think if you feel strongly that this is the way to ensure influences that will assist the governing process, it will be a good thing to suggest. The Governance Commission is actually involved in this exercise. Then those who complaining, if you have a bad senator, you want them for 9 years, they just sit there. Maybe we should cut it short so that we have a chance to change them. The only thing is, no one henceforth, absolutely no one henceforth should use our anger, our disappointments with our leaders to introduce armed violence, because they take advantage of us. We are angry, so they come and say, yeah, gone here, let's do it this way. I think Liberians are now saying never again, and we must hold on to that. No matter how bad it looks, let's see whether we can use the processes available to us, especially when we have in place a government that is open for such changes to come.
Thank you. Another question. Now that heaven has spared your life and made you a new age political leader in the emerging new Liberia, what core lessons learned would you like to share with us? And what are you doing now or plan to do to protect this new Liberia? Meaning, you have lived through all of this confusion, and yet you're there now in a position where a difference can be made. Even though it may not be the presidency, but at least you're part of that system that can decide the future of this country. Are you noticing any hopefulness in a better Liberia tomorrow, or do you see any other difficulties or areas that you want to recommend that need to be considered or dealt with in this presentation as we look into the Liberia's past?
Mr. Commissioner, I said to my friends that I have accepted to work in this government because I believe in the leader and the ideas that we have all been pushing. I say to people, at the moment we do not have political parties that are ideologically based, that are based on some very strong principles that show differences. We have seen political structures in which people go for an opportunity. So, what I then believe is that the more we put people who consider our country first together, whatever party they may come from, whatever association they may have, but there are people in each group that have a common view about Liberia and appeal to that. That small body of Liberians will continue to grow, even if they manifest themselves in their parties, so that in whatever party they are, they will be carrying the message. I think, therefore, in terms of the hows and the whys and stuff, the fact that we have something, we're talking and we're told that the way forward is ensuring that we Liberians have a common agenda that we agree to, that looks like a vision. And then we Liberians show a commitment to ensuring that we want to get there. This will be ours. We said we will reach there and nothing will stop us from reaching there. And the third thing is having a committed and strong leadership. And it doesn't mean Ellen Johnson Sirleaf alone, it means others around, whether they are leaders in academia, leaders in the churches or mosques, they have to be strong and committed to carrying out this agenda. The closest we have to that agenda is the poverty reduction strategy. Many people should read the document in it, and I read a portion of it. For many of the people who say we blame you people, you're the one who brought this and that. Every time I read the poverty reduction strategy introduction, I say I hope people understand that long before we've been saying, and you heard the historians, there've been injustice in the way we operated. That is what led to the trouble. It wasn't because of the wisdom or the confusion in the mind of Conmany, Wesseh, or anybody. I think then you were giving too much to some of the people we are blaming for everything that went wrong. Because the thing was bad. The thing was rotten. It was going to fall anyway. In fact, it was those people who were trying to hold it so that it would not fall in the way it did. So don't blame them. By blaming them, you're really putting them very high up in the pedestal of history that they should be proud of, not to be ashamed of. In fact, those who make the accusation demonstrate extreme ignorance about our history. This PRS is saying to us that something was wrong, and that beginning now, we should correct it, and it sets into motion the ways in which we should do it. It says right now we have 4 pillars we should use. Let us ensure we have national security, and it will not be regime security that are there to protect the president and our family, but a security force that everyone will feel happy to associate with. A police that you will run to when something happens. That there will be economic revitalization in which Liberians will have ownership. We must not be, be here and living off the crumbs of Lebanese people. That's what that revitalization, even if they don't say it, we must insist that this is what it means, and we want to make sure that's what it will produce. We say infrastructure development. This time around, when we build a dam, a hydro dam, it must not supply electricity to Central Monrovia alone. I want to see electric power in Tigreken. I want to see electric power there. And when it's going, all the villages along the road must have electric power. That's what that thing called infrastructure development means. That you're building those services, the hospitals, the clinics. And then the one that says governance and the rule of law. That we have a governing process in which there's so much decentralization that people in the village have a say in whatever the money they're being paid, the things that come from their coffee and cocoa, that they have a say in it. And they are able to elect their leaders, that they can say, we put you there, Mr. Superintendent. That's what the PRS is. If we internalize it, then we say, this is at least a start towards the national vision. And that we will do something, each of us will do it and will make sure that it works.
Thank you. Wow. Well, I'm very grateful. You've introduced me to a document, a concrete, practical thing that you are now doing to ensure the protection of the future Liberia. And we'll read that, and we'll also be watching, because we learned that many have come up with big visions and nice thoughts, only to find out later that when the seeds of selfishness and corruption hits the heart, they die away from it. I hope this will not happen. My last question then has to deal with this issue of that I have talked to you earlier about 1980. I'm trying to understand really what happened that particular year and event. Many have told us that we need to do an in-depth research into this, and I agree with that. But I was wondering whether there's any little seed information you would like to add to our research process with regard to who killed William Aaron Hubbard in 1980. If you don't have anything, you can just say, no, I don't have any new information.
I wouldn't say, I wouldn't venture into any, we say we should tell the truth and say what you know, not to speculate.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to speculate. What I would say is I believe that President William Richard Talbot was a sacrificial lamb for the saints of his class.
Thank you very much. I end my questions now.
Good afternoon, Mr. Witness. Thank you again for appearing. I have few questions for you, but I will start with my last question first. As you spoke, thoughts came across my mind. Okay. You mentioned when you were responding to my colleague Reverend Coleman's question, you mentioned that in your understanding, the objective of the TRC is not to hold anybody. Before I proceed with the rest of the question, I want you to bear in mind that I will be asking you to please explain what do you mean to hold anybody, so that when you are explaining, you can explain that for us. Against that background, there are others who are of the opinion that while the TRC is reconciliatory in nature as well, but there are other components of the TRC, of the process, that culminates into one. So you have the element of justice. Of course, it speaks of securing the peace and the security that we now enjoy. There are others who are of the opinion that at least those who bear the greatest responsibility, especially for human rights violations, should at least account or answer to the Liberian people. You are of the opinion that the TRC is not to hold anyone, which you will explain for us later on. But I want to refer you to the TRC Act, Article 7, Section 28, I think it's G, where it speaks of amnesty and persecution. I will not read the whole thing so as not to bore you, but I will just go to the point where it says recommending amnesty under terms and conditions established by the TRC upon application of individual persons making full disclosures of their wrongs and thereby expressing remorse for their acts and or omissions, whether as an accomplice or a perpetrator, provided that amnesty or exoneration shall not apply to violations of international humanitarian law and crimes against humanity in conformity with international laws and standards. Okay, so when you speak of the TRC is not to hold anybody, and then you went ahead to say the TRC, in your opinion, you think only those who come here and intentionally tell lies under the TRC Act, they commit perjury, and so those people should be the ones that the TRC should really be working extra with to account, or should be held for perjury for lying on the oath. Just like for you to clarify that, whether you are saying to us that we should ignore the provision of the TRC Act that says we should be recommending persecution in some cases, of course, on a case-to-case basis, and of course in other cases or other instances we will be expected to recommend amnesty. Can you just clarify what you really meant?
Madam Chair, Madam Commissioner, yes, this is indeed a difficult question. I said that I chaired the commission, the committee of the legislature that passed this act, and it is one of the things that I feel very, very proud that I did in terms of a law in the legislature when we were there for those 2.5 years. This particular debate was very, very heated. There are many of you with the commission that, and this actually came from civil society. That's another point people need to understand. The drafting of this act involved people from civil society, including people on the commission. I think that when this came up, and in my training in conflict management and resolution, the question is always the end. What was the intention? What is the end that we were seeking by this law? The end we're seeking was to ensure that there was deterrent so that our future will be protected. So no one would do something and say, oh, one day there will be TRC and then they will forget about it. So they would know that there is some punishment. The ultimate challenge you have is how to bring up front the end that we are seeking, which will be a more durable, peaceful society. So this will be reminding people that you are not off the hook yet, because there is an international law that is stronger and bigger than this. But your first step that can help to mitigate a look at this is to come here and say the truth and say, I did. I am so sorry. These were the circumstances. I was on drugs. I mean, we were doing this, and when I shot, I didn't even realize that I had done so. I mean, truly, it's not the type of sorry. Somebody say, don't bring that child still sorry to me. Where you say sorry, So they can all set up a committee, as they used to do every committee. They make Archbishop Francis chair when the intention was not for anything to happen. And to say sorry so we can pass over it, and the same thing gets repeated. Not that. And you can tell if someone comes and saying that type of sorry, that they are not really sorry. They're not really telling the truth. Because I know some things. For example, there were some witnesses and things that were said that I know of, that in some ways that I saw, and I know they are not telling the truth. Two things may happen. Either at the time they were doing it, they were under certain influences, and now, dementia has set in, so they're forgetting, and it's happening in human mind. Sometimes you forget. So they probably really, truly have forgotten until somebody sits with them and remind them. That may be the case. Or they think the other people have forgotten. So I was talking because nobody will remember. So that is guiding the statements that some people make that I found not to be totally true. So what I say to you is that yes, you have this, but everything that this law seeks to get is about protecting our future, to ensure we don't go back into violence, we don't use this, that everybody will know that whatever you do, there will be a day of accounting, and you will account no matter how you do it. So I'm not saying you should not respect the law. In fact, I think you should pursue the law, but as the lawyers among you will say, will tell, when we say temper mercy with justice, right? Is that how they say it? That's right. Temper justice with mercy. That's right. So that will lead you to say, oh yes, indeed this person did this, which is cognizable before the international court. But from what they explain, from our own judgment of what they explain, they probably really didn't mean it. And they won't do it again. That's very important.
Okay, so Mr. Witness, in other words, it's important for us to clarify this particular point so that you don't have flashy headlines tomorrow that says, for example, Ambassador, I think you're Ambassador now, Ambassador Wesseh calls for bygones to be, or what, how these headlines can go sometimes, or he don't support persecution, whatever. So in other words, you are saying that we should respect the TRC Act, especially Article 7, which speaks of the functions and powers of the Commission under Section G, that says, yes, we may consider recommending persecutions and also amnesty, but based upon terms and conditions, of course, established by this body, but take into consideration other issues like full disclosure, like you said, the nature of the violation itself, and of course, whether the person is contrite, whether people are prepared to apologize and move on. Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. My next question concerns the late President Talbot, William Aaron Talbot, and the coup of 1980. You just stated here that he was a sacrificial lamb for the sins of his class. I hope I'm quoting you correctly. Equally so, other witnesses who testified before you, like Councillor Chair Chiku, former Chief Justice of Liberia, stated that he thought President Talbot was a good man, and his death, that he sustained an unnecessary death. Mr. Oscar Kuya testifying also alluded to Talbot's goodness. I think it was him or one of them stated that they thought President Talbot was the most progressive president. Dr. Sawyer was also here, and he thought that Talbot was a good president. So based upon all of these assertions from all of you, will it be proper then to assume here that President Holbrook was probably misunderstood, and so now he's been validated even in his death.
You know, maybe I should say a few things about how I come to my conclusions about Tobin. I didn't meet President Tobin until I got to the university as a student leader. And one of our first interactions was something that had happened on campus, and then the president sent for us. First, we had issued a statement. At some point, we had issued a statement, and I'm going to have an extended answer to tell you about experiences with the class of leaders that we interacted with, you know. So if you don't mind. One of the experiences was going to the University of Liberia board meeting, where we're talking about some things about increases in and some conditions at the university basically. And then Bernard Blamo was president. I wasn't the president of the student union. In fact, it was J.D. Zegado Koto, who is the current minister of education, who was the president. And I was chairing the Foreign Relations Committee at the time. But the board had invited us, and we went into this room. And the thing was that we had issued a statement in which we used the word demand the government. And they were very, very angry. How could we use such words? Like demand of the visitor, the president. So they were very angry on behalf of President Tobin. Yet, the word that was coming from the mansion through his security and stuff was that the president would like to see us. He wasn't sending police on us. But when we went into the room of the university board, now the board of trustees of the university had on it Richard Abraham Henrys, who was the speaker. He was president of the board. Frank Emmanuel Tobin, who was president pro tempore, was a member. And you just named them from the legislature. So whenever you appear before the board, you were appearing before the government. And as we entered this room, and the delegation included J.D. Koto, Dusty, there was Hadina Smythe, and somebody else. And as we entered the room, all these old men, I guess that was our first time in this type of setting. So they terrified us. And you know very well those days. You know, people when I was growing up, I thought being a government official meant to be old and ugly. So that's how I thought, to be member of the house and be this, to be old and ugly. So you go into this room and these old men, all of them sitting down like, you know, and so then as we entered, the man said, "Hey, gentlemen, who are you? Are you students?" Because when they were talking, so we tried to sit down, and they ordered us up, and then they gave us the Riot's Act to start with. And then when they interview, "You, where are you from? What's your name?" And JD now, he spent a long time in America now, so his English changed a little bit. But that time, when he spoke, he had a very deep accent from Nimba, from Mano accent. So he said, "My name is JD Koto." They said, "What? Where are you from?" He says, Richard Henry went through the interrogation. He said, "From Nemba County." He says, "Nimba country?" He said, "Yes, sir." "Oh, I remember Nimba country. When I was supervisor of schools, I used to go from town to town, and those people are strong. They used to carry me in a hammock. They carry me and this and that. Now we are students of the university who are now being saying this thing was bad, but he didn't say it like out of hatred. He was saying exactly what he used to do. And then he goes on to the next person. Oh, where you communist? We say, communist? What a boy is this with such a name? I said, no, not communist. Conmany, Wesseh. Wesseh. Oh, group baby. Oh, all right. Okay, all right. We did then move on to the next person and such and such. Now these things are imprint in the minds of young people you're talking to. You say, oh, you mean these people still think they're going to be riding our heads? Then the president sent for us. In one of those meetings, the president will sit and say, oh, you are my precious jewels. You gotta behave yourselves. This is how he would talk to us. Now go back and go to your lessons. And even though some others would have been so angry, the security people would have been so angry. And I can name a whole lot of experiences of this sort. April 14, when it happened, and as I told you, there were the 5 names posted all over the place as the ringleaders. That was John Stewart, who is a member of your committee, the commission. James Yazia, he's working with an NGO here. It's Oscar Kuya, Bacchus Matthews, and myself. 5 names with posters, $5,000 reward, wanted dead or alive. We were named as the ringleaders. And the first people to turn themselves in was John Stewart and myself. When they were looking for us, we had been in a place in hiding. It happened, and I can say that today. And that is why, again, that not us, that people don't look at the struggles from the Congo and country perspective. We were in hiding in the home of Kenneth Best's sister, whose boyfriend or partner had a different point of view about what we were doing. And then he would come into the house while we were, and this woman was hiding us there. And they would come and they would, with his friends, and they would be talking about how Torbert is a Whig man. They could have dealt with these young men, and she would join them. Yeah, do that. They should. But we were there in the house with this woman, protected us for nearly 2 weeks. As so many of the other people looking for us, when the Guinean planes were flying all over the place, we were there. Abba Put came and said to us, young man, you cannot run away from the law. You can't run away from the law. Go and turn yourselves in. And after pondering, we wrote a letter, punch our fingers and sign it with our blood, and send it to Torbert that we were coming to turn ourselves in. And Tomo Reeves, Aberport, probably George Brown, I remember, Bishop, Reverend Tomo Reeves, Dr. Sawyer, then they took us in to Torbert. When we got into the executive mansion office, the entire cabinet and the key leaders of the legislature were there. It was a room full of these men. It was intimidating. And that was the first time we were hearing Torbert telling his story about what had happened. This man had been led to believe that we were communists who had come from Cuba and brought into the country Russians and Cubans, brought drugs and gave drugs to all these people who were demonstrating in the streets. And that we were so dangerous. Particularly, Dusty Wolokoli had gone to Benin to an international students meeting and had come back to join me and others at Cottington, where we were holding the first Congress of Lensu. We had reorganized Lensu into what we now call Lensu. and having the Congress at Cottington. When Dusty had returned with our international guests, who we had informed the governor about, one of whom was a Russian, two were from Senegal. And the government gave us a car and a bus, and we had a university bus. It was on the radio. Mr. Buya told you here, that is a very true story, that we had gone to the Ministry of Information to help us publicize that meeting. So we were at Cottington. While at Cottington, we wrote a message on April 13th. Wrote a message, a cablegram to the president, and said in the cablegram, which I signed, Mr. President, please allow the demonstration to take place. Let them exercise their democratic right to assemble peaceably, as the Constitution says. That was the message we sent to the president. It was that message that the security people or whatever may have turned around to say that indeed I had organized this. I was one of the ringleaders. Of course we came and met the president. And when everybody in that room wanted us eaten up, the president spent most of his time explaining what he had gone through. It was as if he was talking to a preacher. How he was so scared. How they were shooting near the mansion. He would see the fire and this and that. What he forgot was the shooting he heard was not by the demonstrators. They didn't have guns. It was his people. And yet with him in the mansion was Cowboy Johnson, who was the chief of staff. He sent for Cowboy and he says to us, I told Cowboy, I said, Cowboy, sit with me. Vic, you sit with me. They got to kill us together. He was petrified. And as he told the story, he still showed how petrified he was. Yet he had been told that we had brought these communists to destabilize the country. He then went on to say that he had been told by the security people that in fact the meetings to organize the demonstration was held in Cruiserville, in the home of Aberport. It was at this time that Aberport jumped up and almost jumped on the president. Mr. President, you have to prove it. I will sue you if you don't prove it. And then Wilfred Clark and Massacre was the muscular guy who was the SS director. They were all in the room. They jumped between them to stop them. But Aberport was emphasizing that he would sue the president. With all of that, all I'm saying, this man, for what he had gone through, was never angry enough to say, as others have done, go and kill them or do whatever. He just say, y'all just take them, y'all take care of them. It was after we were turned in that Mr. Bacchus Matthews turned himself in, who had been actually the ringleader. And it was when we were at the central prison with Oscar Queer, the rest of the other people came and were brought in, some were arrested, some were brought there, but we had been there. It was there that, we heard that Bacchus had written this letter in which he was appealing to the president for us to be set free and blah, 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 blah. But in that prison, there was a whole lot of debate that took place. Why was Bacchus taken to NSA in a nice room, in a hotel? I mean, that looked like a hotel. He was eating food from the restaurant and this and that. And there were those who felt, oh, but Bacchus is the godchild of President Torben. Oh, but Bacchus is the son of a Congo man or a Congo woman or something of this sort. That's why you see these people. And all kinds of debates went on in the prison. Why were we in another prison in the murder cell in one prison and he was in another? after all that had happened, I'm just showing you that side of Tolbert. He got backers to write a letter. And on the strength of the letter, the president replied. I don't know whether many people have heard the language of the president. Let me just see what I can read. If I think I came with a copy of that letter. I hope I came, yeah. If you have the time, let me read the letter that Bacchus wrote. You are aware of it?
Mr. Buya, when he testified,
He read it.
So if you have a copy of the president's response, that would be helpful.
Okay, let me read the president's response. The president replied, this is President Tolbert. This was this letter he used to write to everybody, the way he used to address people. Dear friends, this is to the man who had just led the demonstration, and this is on April 25th. This is what, how many days? 15 days, just 2 weeks after the demonstration had taken place. The wound was still around, and the president wrote, Dear friend, I acknowledge with thanks your letter of today's date, in which you expressed regrets on behalf of yourself and your collaborators, and noted the dilemma which you, young people, now face as a consequence of the unfortunate events which occurred over the Easter weekend because of the action taken by you. I am delighted to know that you have now come to the understanding that wisdom is the principal thing according to the good book. When it comes to the reconstruction of our country, I have made it clear that I desire all the people of the country to participate in this national endeavor. This country is ours, and we must together build it through total involvement, self-reliance, and a firm faith in Almighty God. This is the basis of my consistent policy for national development and progress, so that all our people might enjoy a higher standard of living. In this process, we must first of all reconstruct ourselves morally and spiritually. We must change our attitudes and our ideologies foreign to the Liberian way of life to enable us to physically reconstruct our country for the benefit of all of us. The governed must operate together with the government. You can rest assured that I shall give your appeal timely consideration. With kindest regards, at rally time, faithfully yours, in the cause of the people, W.R. Tolbert Jr. This was the president's letter. I read it also to answer why many people have this view that in spite of some difficulties, he had a certain type of soberness. And it is that type of soberness that many of his class allies said they thought he was crazy. That Totma would not allow this. This is not the way to rule. People like this, Totma would not allow them out. They would be in. This will happen. This will happen. And because he had a different point of view, because he had an exposure, he had traveled around the world, probably traveled more than any other leader before him, and probably traveled more than many of the people in his government. And so he had a certain type of exposure, I believe, that made him to have certain type of tolerance. There were a few people within that group, I must say, that I personally interacted with. When the students at the university, when I was leader and were raising questions about development not being even, and there were Susuku projects that were going to the poor in Bubadi and in Putu, James Phillips sent for us at on the campus, sent for us to go to his home. He sat with us one night, told a story about how he came from school with a master's degree, started a farm in Bindi and this, that. Wonderful story. And then said, but you know, we're doing something which you don't know. Maybe I should take you around. So he organized one group of students to go to Lofa, another group to go elsewhere, to go to Grand Jide. And he personally said, since you are president, I want to take you personally to Grand Jide to see the projects that the government are undertaking. The government is undertaking. So he had his own private plane. And I guess that was the first time that I was using that small Cessna sitting with the minister. He flew me there. My delegation was there, and we saw there was a certain type of openness within certain group within the leadership. Or the case of Cesar Dennis, who, when I was due to travel as president of the Student Union, the foreign ministry refused to give me a passport. They are taking my passport from the airport for no reason. He sent and said he wanted to see me. And said to me, look, young man, I can assure you, you have a right to carry a passport. No one should deny you a passport. In fact, since you're president of the Student Union, you're going to travel, we'll give you an official passport. He went further and said, you know, many of you don't know. You just bunch everybody together as Congo people. He said, my mother, something about his mother being bi or something of that sort. He went on, told the story. And then says, my wife, Agnes Dennis, who was a professor at the university teaching us science, the dean of the science college. He said, that woman, that raw crew woman, ma and pa, she know Dennis, she know Cooper, she is a crew woman. The two sisters, we brought them here. They stayed with some Coopers, and then they became civilized. Now they can't speak crew. They act like they can't speak crew. So don't blame us. You blame your own people. They ain't want to speak your dialect. You know, I mean, we had different types of interactions. And everywhere we went, the respect with which people treated Torben and Cesar Dennis as our foreign minister was a pride to us. So I do not subscribe to a generalized description of people, and I say that those who believe that the old order was right and they must keep it may have been the dominant force, but it didn't mean that there were not people within the Trui party who had a different point of view, who wanted a change, certainly not keeping the things the way they are. And so when we say Torben was a good man, it's in that context. I think he belonged, as they would say, on the left of the Trui party. And in that process, he was despised by his own people. And to the others, he was slow, too slow. So he was caught in the middle. And people took advantage. Now, who killed him? I certainly don't believe that just by themselves alone, they had it. However, I can say that on April 14, when we were in detention, there was the view. And you will remember that while we were in detention, June 4th took place in Ghana. Earlier in May that year, Rawlings tried to make a coup d'etat. Or Kufuor, who was a military fellow at the time, the military commander, had come to Liberia on a visit in May, because many leaders came to sympathize with Torben. And Rawlings led the march troop, the guard parade that saw the president off and saw him in. And shortly after, there was some little rumbus. On June 4th, Rawlings made a coup. Young officers made a coup. Elsewhere, there have been such things happening. How those things impacted on this young group of fellows who used to play checkers in PHP together, how other people may have impacted on them, I don't know. And I'm not going to participate in the speculations. All I do know is that the system was so rotten and weak at foundation that it gets too little to push it. And it shows the Whig party wasn't strong because just a little push, it fell. Not even by people who had command. The soldiers did not have a command. Because to have a command, you must be a commander who gave orders to your troop. How come a sergeant who didn't have anything under him, except for probably 8 men, would do something like this?
Thanks for answering that question. You spoke rather, I think, passionately about your advocacy years, beginning from when you were a student leader, when you joined the student movement, to your association in the Progressive People's Alliance. How?
No, never been.
Were you ever a part of the organization of the Rest Riots with the how?
I just explained. I did not organize.
Were you a member of the organization?
I was not a member of PAL, never been. I was never a member of the PPP, never been. I was a member of Moja, a leading member of Moja.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. So, you explained to us your passion for working and advocating for social justice for all Liberians, equal opportunities, and what have you. But then you also inform us that you are well exposed and experienced, probably much more than a lot of your contemporaries or your peers. And of course, you have held many positions in different administrations. You were a special advisor on the peace process to Dr. Amos Sawyer when he was interim president. And then you served in other capacities as well. Ministry of Youth and Sports, also under Dr. Sawyer. And you were in the TLA at the time as well. I would just like for you to just tell us very briefly, if you can, what would you say, you as an individual, what would you say has been your own personal contribution towards this new paradigm shift of good governance and the societal, of the rule of law and equal distribution of wealth for everybody? What has been your own contribution? What would you say has been your most memorable contribution that you have made towards this new society that you are envisioning?
Madam Commissioner, I have avoided talking, if you note in the beginning, I avoided talking about myself because one of my friends said there's been a lot of relaunching. If people thought people have forgotten about you, so you come to the TRC and tell your whole story so people can remember you ain't no small potato. I've been avoiding that, but just to say and correct some of the stuff I said in terms of my association, probably I should say that, student movement and, the YMCA, the IY Club and things, and the movement for justice in Africa impacted a whole lot on my life. And then schools I went to here and abroad, programs I've attended. But then in the government, the first time I entered government, and I just want to say, when I was first offered a government job, it was in the year that I was graduating from the university, and it was Estrada Bernard, who was then Minister of Youth and Sports, and Barney Sherman was leaving the position of Assistant Director for Youth. It was a position that paid well and you had a car. I was offered, the Assistant Minister called me, that Barney was leaving for school abroad, and if I could take that job. But I was just ending my year as president of the Students' Union and was concentrating on rebuilding the National Student Movement. So I refused it. It wasn't because I was any wiser. But I'm just saying that you had a mandate, the mandate hadn't been completed, and I know I was being offered the job because of what I had been doing. So I didn't want to exploit the student movement and for myself. So if they had any big impact on others, then it did. So the first time I really took a government job was when I became advisor to Dr. Sawyer. And I became Minister of Youth and Sports not under Dr. Sawyer. When Dr. Sawyer resigned and there was a reconstitution of the government, the 4 slots that were given to civil society and political parties, one of those slots was Minister of Youth and Sports. As you know, we told you the armed groups are being brought into the government, and they wanted what they were calling lucrative jobs. So the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Postal Affairs, and some other ministry, I don't remember now, were the 4 ministries that were given to the unarmed majority. The rest of the thing went to civil society. In that position, I tried to turn the ministry around. I worked and we developed a relationship at that time, relationship that had broken between the LFA and the ministry. There was no program, youth program anyway. So we decided to reorganize and build systems and began to talk about youth for development. We started talking about sports for reconciliation and began to promote George Weah because we wanted the image of a new youth to the international community. Moving on from there, and of course as advisor, my contribution was to negotiate with all the various armed parties, and I saw many things. I went to Prince Johnson to carry messages, and I saw things on Prince Johnson's base. I went to Banga. I was the first official from the interim government to dare to go to Banga. I was in Banga sitting with Taylor when they killed the 6 Senegalese soldiers in Bahoun, and I saw his reaction, and I know what happened. I had to leave that night and went that night back to Monrovia. You know, there were a number of things that I went through, I ventured to do with others, and which contributed to the peace process. I traveled to many countries in West Africa, many times traveling sometimes without any per diem, and going and staying with friends that I've made or what have you, meeting with presidents in those regions, in the sub-region, from Abacha to Sokolo to everybody, carrying messages. If you ask me, those were some of the contributions for peace. And of course, move on to the legislature. Before I came to the legislature, I told you how we tried and we got Mr. Campari and his government to stop supporting Mr. Taylor. And Taylor knew it. That was one of the reasons why he was very angry with me. You know, we were able to get it done, and they withdrew their support. We even got the Libyans to withdraw their support for Taylor for a while. I went on many secret missions for peace in Liberia. Some I can't tell you without telling a lie. And we said we should talk the truth. But for reconciliation, we have to balance. For reconciliation, some will not be told.
Okay, thank you very much. You just mentioned the name of Senator Prince Johnson, which brings to the fore my next question. It has been alleged, or at least it has been rumored, that you visited his base along with the delegation of IGNU at the time of the interim government of national unity, and you had quite an experience at one of your visits there. And if I may, rumors has it that during one of your visits, Mr. Johnson brought out the head, a skeleton head, a skull, which was supposedly the skull of the late President Samuel Doe. Would you like to comment?
Now we say we have to balance between the truth and reconciliation. I heard the other day that there was a meeting. I heard the other day that there was a meeting between the family of Mr. Doe and Mr. Johnson, and there was some hobnobbing. Madam Commissioner, maybe I should say, and I heard someone on the radio this morning, I think we would do well to spare our president this type of activity. Because this is precisely how people rally their ethnic groups when they singularly have committed an offense. I think if you commit an offense, whether you Kran, Dio, Mano, whatever you are, Grebo, Muslim, Christian, you answer for yourself. Don't bring your tribal people behind you. Don't bring your religious leaders behind you, and answer for yourself. Because as soon as we begin to see a thing done by a Kran man and say we bring Kran people and accuse them or make them to feel they have to answer for it, I think something is wrong. There will be something wrong if Doe family felt that, this is because Doe was a Kran man, so everything about Doe, they have to come up to defend it and stuff. Then they're making a sad mistake. That's not reconciliation. I think reconciliation is based on justice. To come to your question, I am curious, and I'm sure if we remind Mr. Johnson, if it is so important for the process as to how Doe was buried or where he was buried, and we have to do a reburial to bring it to closure, then maybe Mr. Johnson needs to come again and tell a story. What happened? Because unless what happened, what I experienced with him was not the truth. I had gone to carry messages as I did that Dr. Sawyer wanted to step down. Dr. Sawyer didn't want to be president again, but the ECOWAS, the peace plan required that people should disarm to follow the ceasefire. We needed to disarm. And if they were ready to disarm, and the letter was written to Mr. Johnson, as the letter was written to Mr. Taylor, those were the two armed groups that were existing at the time. I went there with a gentleman called Brunel Swen, who was an assistant, worked with me as an assistant. I think he's in this hall. There was another gentleman, there was Mrs. Luvian Ash Thompson. She and I were the committee that were going from Taylor to Prince Johnson base and going from place to place. And I recall that when we got there, having gone through all the discussion, the purpose of our visit, and Prince came down about what he had to say about Bacchus Matthews and Sawyer, and that Sawyer organized this black parade to kill him and this, that, and praised me as being a nice guy, good friend, and today we are still good friends. Said all the nice things. I recall that Mr. Johnson then said to me, look, Conmany, the Doe man who wanted to kill you, I finished with him. I said, yeah, I heard it. He said, you don't believe it? I said, yes, I believe it. And he said, no, you look, Musu, some girl was there, some woman, Musu or Bindu or one of those Bani. He said, go and bring the man here. And he came, the woman came with a skull on a platter. And he said, that the man here there. I said, okay, that's fine. He said, no, you scared? It can't do nothing, the man die. But that's what happened. So I am very curious as to what then happened to the other part of the body. Was it the time that it was cremated, or was it buried? That's when a wish of the body that was giving this 25-year embalmment. If the body was embalmed on first time around, I think it's good to say so. If we're cremated, say so. But the story about, this person, other than, I think, again, maybe one forget. But at least Mrs. two of our teachers, I'm sure, I don't know their name, but there were two teachers who were with Mrs. Vivian Ash Thompson. They were there in the room when this thing happened. So I'm sure many of them heard the story. My thing is that if the objective, again, I come back to objective, if the objective is to put to closure all of our people who've been killed in ways that we need to remember our leaders, then maybe we should come together again and tell the truth. Maybe we can find whatever happened to those bones and say, all right, we're bringing the matter to closure and have a proper burial. Or go to and where Torbert was buried and probably see, or where Wesseh was buried and probably find out. But it has to be a national decision. It cannot be left to the Doe family or Johnson family and they go shake hands and tomorrow something gets in somebody's head again, they say something, then you say Crown people are affected and this, let's bring them together. I think we must not waste our time and resources on that type of reconciliation. It would not work because anybody can go and steal. You remember those days when somebody go and steal, they say that Baza man, then all the Baza people in the community start feeling guilty. And I know some of the most honest people in the world are Bazas. So we must get away from it. If it is John Brown who must account for his deeds, let him alone. And nobody should go to the accountant or think coming to this TRC and bring the chiefs and the elders and think to come to clap for them. It is wrong. You coming for yourself. Account for your own actions. I haven't been confirmed yet. Don't ask me any more questions that will make people not vote on the confirmation.
Okay, then I shall remember to keep calling you Mr. Witness then. Well, Mr. Witness, thank you very much for that answer and that truth. You see, we want to remind the public and everybody that this TRC is also about truth-telling. An integral part of what we do is about truth-telling. You all have given us the mandate to do this. And the only way we can really lay the ghost to rest is, I think, if we can all come here truthfully, say the truth, whatever it is. Because you see, when you say the truth today, I think it prevents hard feelings tomorrow. So maybe if the truth was told years ago, or maybe 2-3 weeks ago, since we started this process, maybe we wouldn't have everybody coming up now being angry because they think people didn't tell the truth or whatsoever. So it's very important when we ask for the truth. It's not because we're wish hunting anybody or we want to make anybody look ridiculous, but we know that it is important for the rest of our process, not only on the TRC but nationally as one people. At least with the truth, victims can find closure, then they can start to forgive, and reconciliation can truly be realized. Other than that, everything we do here will just be superficial. So thank you so much for answering that question, and I proceed with my questioning. I have a question concerning the late Vice Chairman of the TRC, Mr. Wesseh. What was the relationship to him? And I understand that you also had a unique experience with Mr. Wesseh. Can you please share that with us? Did that experience lead to your being arrested and incarcerated, or was it after you were arrested and incarcerated?
Well, I didn't have very much interaction with Sen, but the two that I remembered vividly, I like to mention. The first interaction, very active, basic interaction was, I was on the same program with Wesseh at the university, at Cottington University College. they speak. I was then president of the University of Linsu. And we were at Cuttington at a program. I don't remember what the program was. But the speakers included Dr. Wema Fambule and Wesseh. And Wesseh delivered a speech. At that speech, clearly written for him by a friend of ours, Michael Oben, who is so rest in peace. I'm told that he wrote it, and he says so. In that speech, Wesseh was questioning the PRC's decision to break diplomatic relations with Israel, with Libya, and also the taunting of the Russian embassy that was here, and also questioning there was a Cuban embassy then, and things like that. Many of the things that in Torber's program, Torber was saying that he was not aligned and making new friends beyond the American friendship. So it was a very moving speech. And so 3 of us were on that platform. And all of us spoke in endorsement of what Wesseh had said. And that he emphasized the question of non-alignment, like Liberia should be not aligned. We should not make our friends because somebody is telling us not to keep such a friend. We engaged him in discussion about some of the things for which he had been accused. You remember he was accused of being the one who had gone to Sino and broke down the monuments of Congo people monuments and this, that, and that. And in his explanation, just from his layman explanation, for him, he said he thought these were symbols of the old rule. And when they were growing up, and I'm sure many other people in this room believe that, when we were growing up and going to school in Palmas and saw the monuments, we were told that under those monuments, where they killed somebody, put their head there, they did this, and all the strength of the American Liberians was under there. Now this is ignorance. Clearly, this is ignorance. But Wesseh was still in that stupor or that ignorance when he became president, when he became vice chairman. Nothing changed. He believed that. And so, if we say we remove these people from power, then their symbols should be removed. So he asked us, but something wrong with that? We move the people from power, we got to move everything they're depending on. That they think they're meeting they're depending on under there. So that's what he did. Again, that's the level of his development. I wouldn't hold him for it. I would hold those who didn't help him understand the relevance of national monuments and national symbols. So I forgave him. The next time we interacted was when I was thrown in jail by Mr. Doe. Again, Doe had thrown me in jail in June 1981. And I said, among the charges against me was that I had suggested that development should be widespread, that we should ask the people in Grand Jide. We were then part of Grand Jide. River G was part of Grand Jide, was Lower Grand Jide. In a citizens meeting that had taken place at the Centennial Pavilion, he had asked, the meeting was going on, I hadn't said anything, and he said, but look, my man, you want to outbook people. We're having this meeting, you say nothing. And I got up to say, two things. One, you're talking about development and you say they should pave the streets in Zwedru. But there is no functioning high school in the lower part of River G, of Grand Jide. There is no proper clinic. Everything is in Zwedru. The same thing the people were doing when we were Eastern region. Everything was in Hapa. So we were caught in the middle and our children couldn't go to school. So could you have a meeting to ask about what are the priorities that they should invest in. Mr. Doe, it didn't stop there. I said the second point is, the people are grumbling when you said that the money they're developing should be given to John Ramsey as treasurer. They said when he was superintendent or something, they're giving him some money, $25,000 to build a clinic or something in Lower Grand Jide, you know, in the Webo area where I come from. And the fact that that wasn't built, they said this new money you gave him, give it to the same man. So people are concerned about who's going to manage the development fund. If they don't trust the person, they won't pay. Mr. Doe, I saw the people whispering, Ramsey, the others were on the stage whispering in his ears. And he just jumped up. We didn't come here for confusion. You want to bring confusion here? We come here for development. You like it, you don't like it, jack-o'-lantern. In fact, the meeting finished, the man was spoiled the meeting. And the meeting broke up. As we're leaving, I heard somebody say, you're picking him up. I didn't hear that, but they came and said, look, they said they should pick you up. But then I have all these rebel people who come from Lower Grand Jide, now they came around me and carried me and were very happy that I made this statement. And Peter Johnson, may his soul rest in peace, Ambassador Peter Johnson, who was a very, very wise old man, very wise old man. He was a crown man. Again, it's not about ethnicity. But he went to Doe and said, you can't do that. The boy is right. You called him. You said it was an open meeting. And he said what he had to say. Why are you going to punish him? It was after that, the next thing was Grand Jide students having a program at the university. I had gone there to install the officer with Harry Nayu, Dr. Nayu. And because I gave my point of view about holding people together, looking for the best and not on ethnicity, they went to Doe. I'm told Harry went to Doe and told him, that Conmany we say again on your back. He said you form your government of social crown people. That's what I'm told. Now, that's what I'm told. He said, he probably didn't say that. But it was on that Mr. Doe then decided to take action. I was working with the LEC. Doe, I was then working with the LEC, and then there was the Constitution Commission. If you recall, the first group of people to issue a statement when the coup took place, and I want people to remember that. When the coup took place, there were dancers. People were always dancing, happy. The first time that a statement that laid out an agenda was presented to the PRC, it was done on the 7th of May by the Liberia National Students Union. I was then the president and other colleagues were there. Some of them are in town, Warite, from Cottington, Johnson, Mary Johnson, George Blake here, all of these people from the university were all there. Dusty Wolokoli, Jim Promoyan, the whole batch of us. 20,000 students turned out at the Executive Mansion grounds and presented to Doe, the PRC, that statement. This time they used the statement because we have said that you cannot repeat the same things for which you have overthrown the people. You have to account. You have to tell us when you return into the barracks. You need to organize a Constitution Commission so that there will be changes in the Constitution to reflect the new transformation. Those were the things in our statement. And so when he appointed the Constitution Commission, I was appointed on the commission as the youngest person, as the youth representative more or less. On this day, Mr. Doe wrote to Harry Nua, who was the managing director, to fire me from LEC, and they wrote me to remove me from the Constitution Commission. And then they started, I was then going to the law school. They started an announcement as I was going to class. No, we went to law school class, but I wasn't feeling too good, so we left the class. class, a friend of mine took me in her car, driving me, and said, look, let's stop to Dunn's place. And in the car, the announcement began that I was an anti-revolutionary, that I was banned from visiting people, from meeting with anybody, from anyone visiting me. A South African banning law was announced by the TRC. I guess my friends tell me I'm the only person who has suffered that in Liberia history. But that's what happened under the Dole regime. It was that prison that I was taken to in fact, I wasn't taken to prison immediately. The Observer came out the next day with all the stories and things and letters to the editor questioning the authority. If the government would attack me, who else they wouldn't attack, because these are the young people who were supposed to be the foot soldiers of this revolution. We're now questioning the revolutionary credentials of the PRC. Then he was going out of the country. Was it Zimbabwe or Kenya to an OU event, 1981. Sando Moore was going with him as the editor, as the photographer. They arrested him. They arrested Kenneth Best, his wife, even the printer, the guy who was running the typewriters and stuff. Everybody was picked up. But before they picked them up, they had picked me up, and that was the story. I was living PHP with Dusty. Dusty and I rented a house. He stayed upstairs. I lived downstairs. And they picked me up. And some of the guys who were involved, from the entire PRC members came to my house. Chief of Staff Duba was there. Quiwoma, the whole batch of them, every single one of them, except Zuo, Sumo, Wesseh, everybody else. They picked me up that night, put me in the back of a Chevrolet, and began to drive along the beach, BTC beach. And as we're driving along the beach, this guy had a pistol in my ear and said, "You're finished tonight. We're taking you and we'll finish you." The chief said we should finish you. You got big mouth. And as we went along, then I heard from the handset, "As you were, bring the prisoner over to BTC, to Post Arcade." When we got there, we met Kwibumba. And he said to the jailer, the man in charge, must have been called Noah or something, I don't remember. He said, "Look, the chief changed his mind. He said, you should jail this man. This is the chief's prisoner." He said, "You must kill him." This is Kwibumba saying this too. The man didn't say we should kill him. You just put him in interview. You show him small, but don't kill him. Right there, I was stripped naked, butt naked, carried to the Post Arcade in this room called interview, which has only a single diamond hole. It's a tiny little room, and threw me in there. Some of the people who had been arrested after the coup d'etat were still in there. One of the guys, Charles the Shield, who was a friend of mine, he used to be head of the NSA, Mark the Shield's son, came to that little window and told me, "My friend, we've been expecting you ever since. They've been talking that you will be brought here." Now I don't know who was helping them to make that decision. But I was then threw in there, and Doe then left the country. Kenneth Best and his whole family were now in Central Prison. Their newspaper offices locked. And it was there that one day, all this time, buck naked. This day, we got a message that I was needed to the Capitol building to be, that the vice chairman, as they call them, they used to call him co-chairman, Wesseh, wanted to see me, and the whole council. No, that he wanted to see me. But I didn't have any clothes. All my clothes were gone. So, Mrs. Riggs, I remember her name is Riggs, the lady who they arrested because they say she was holding Angie Riggs, say she was holding A.B. Torben. She was in detention. She had a little room. She had little freedom. And some of the people who they had killed, or some who were in detention, who had gone free, she had washed their clothes that they had. She had pressed them, and they were all stacked of clothes in her little cell. So when they were looking for clothes for me to wear, to go to the TRC, she just said, oh, but I got something here. And she brought these pants, which I found later, and she said, this was Charles Minor's. Charles Minor was then our ambassador in Washington, was then from LPMC when they had put him in. So he said, no, you can take this and wear it. Then they gave me somebody else's shirt. So I had to, because he's a big man, so I had to tie that stuff, and that's how I had something. Don't ask me what else was under. It was just a pant with our shoes, and we're taking to the Capitol building. Now you ask me how that touched me. When we met with the entire PRC in that June, in that meeting, I saw Wesseh presiding, and he said to everyone who was in the room to say what they knew about me, what I had done wrong that they have heard about. One speaker after the other said, oh, that's my first time seeing this man. Oh, the man talk for us. When they talk, that we the soldier people, that we the one they used to talk good about. We the country people. So then we know where they put the man inside. So Wesseh said, that's why I wanted us, so we can know, so when the chief comes, we can all go to beg the chief to free this man. Mary Anthony Brown Sherman was present. Dr. Sawyer and Duke Mason, Professor Duke Twangler Mason, they were present. We went all through this, and I said to them that, you know, this looked like a systematic effort to attack and remove your support base so that you can slip. Because if you want transformation, you have to have allies. Now, if you are attacking everybody else, I don't know who your allies are. Of course, you know, after all of this, they all agreed, including, I must say, including Penu, who was perceived as the baddest guy in town. He too was there and said, oh, I thought this man was some kind of big man. If I hear myself can wrestle, because you know, in the villages, to test each other, you gotta wrestle. And the one in the wrestlers, and that's part of the thing, you test each other. So that's all I could think. His mentality is was at that level. So we could wrestle and he would knock me down. That's what he said. He said, no. When the chief comes, we all will go. Chief, don't worry, we all will talk so they can free him. And I left. They took me back to Postaki. Midnight, I heard the doors banging. Get out. I said, oh my God, I'm finished today. They put me in the car and carried me all over this town. Went to Breville, this place, that place. And finally, around 2 a.m., I was landed in the NSA, in one special room at the NSA. I was told that Wesseh had ordered that I be removed from the Postaki because shortly after that meeting, someone and people said that it was Nayu, who had gone and called Doe wherever he was and said, you sitting there, Mr. Wesseh want to have a good name on your back. And therefore, you better be careful. Take some kind of action. I'm told Wesseh Doe then gave some order to say, but let a man get missing. The idea was that I should get missing from TRC, I tried to escape from the post-stacking, I got killed. That's, again, though didn't tell me, it's all what others said. And that's why Wesseh took the action to remove me from this cell. So, that was the last interaction I had with Wesseh. This is June. The next month is July. And the next month is August. Come August, Wesseh is caught at EAW Junction coming from football field, coming from a game in Bassa for trying to overthrow the government. I'm told that when the evening that they killed him, or the day, that period, right, just before he was killed from the post-stackade, among the things he said was that he was being killed because he ventured to save my life and the life of some others. And it wasn't only Wesseh then that was being told. That's why I'm saying that it was a systematic thing. That it was the same time that Dr. Tubanati Pute was named to be part of those who tried to overthrow the government. And he was due to come into the country. He was supposed to be picked up and probably killed. And every step of the way, people who were seen as part of the popular forces were being attacked, singled out. Then follow Bacchus Matthews, or follow Dr. Fambule and the rest of the other people, one by one. And then Sawyer and the university, and then everyone ultimately left the country. If you ask me then, what I thought about Wesseh, I had seen him in action. I know that he believed in something. He might have been ill-informed, but he believed it. Had we given him opportunity, he probably would have done differently. He had a kind of revolutionary mind, but didn't have enough information to pursue that course. And so he became an obstacle. I am told, and I know, I heard, shortly after the incident where they had gone to Torber's house and collected the loot that some people believe was money, Wesseh protested. And I heard it from his people that same week, that Wesseh and Doe are in a quarrel. His was that, you get anything, let us have it together. I did not get the impression that he wanted it for himself. He had a point of difference with his colleagues about graft. He always questioned. He met with people whenever they came to his offices. It was always an open meeting. He questioned relationships with Firestone and Lamco during the negotiations and things that were being given to them. That's what I know. Thank you.
When you spoke earlier, you gave a scenario of the greed for wealth and power. When you spoke of times where warring factions in a conflict were forming alliances at various peace conferences, including the one in Geneva, Cotonou, etc. And they were opting for a power sharing arrangement because then they could be allotted lucrative government ministries and autonomous agencies. But then we also know that as part of this power sharing arrangement, civil society was represented, and these political parties were also represented in all of these power sharing arrangements. And you had several provisional governments, interim governments. Now my question here is, why was it necessary to have all of these transitional governments, and could something have been done to prevent one transitional government, one power sharing government to another, knowing that it was all about people holding jobs and and filling their pockets? Why did we have to have all those transitional governments that obviously did not work?
Commissioner, if you recall that there were many negotiations that went on long hours. And many times the negotiations always hinged on the issue of this power. I said to you, when it came to that power, the issue of that power, the armed groups immediately came together. There was no fight among them, whether it was Ulimo K, Ulimo J, NPFL, LPC. Whenever it came to the power came, the issue of division of the what they call lucrative areas, they had an alliance. For our side, those of us who represented the unarmed majority, as we call ourselves, we said the only thing we wanted was disarmament, because we knew when you took the gun from them, the thing was over. The issue was not about not wanting Taylor, because they and Taylor people were talking. As we do know that this war, I mean, let's really talk the truth. This war really never took place at any given time with this armed group standing here, the other groups, and they fighting and one. It didn't happen. It's one group go and take over an area where nobody is, and they start doing their diamond business, and they're sitting there. And if they fall asleep, the other guys come and shoot in the air, and they chase them away. Many of them were not dying. The people who suffer most was the unarmed majority. And the women saw that very, very easily, and therefore began to say, whatever we say, Sawyer and the other people, y'all please hold on to this one alone, this armament. They can take anything, all the jobs they can take it, but let them give up the guns. That's the test of seriousness. But when the discussions were going on, when we were holding the line during those debates, whether it was in Yamoussoukro or Akosombo or in Accra, what were we hearing on the ground? The people on the ground would be saying, look, y'all want power, y'all want to hold on to power. Y'all move from there, the other people when they take it, they will do the disarmament. I'm sure you remember that big debate. Some of you will remember the big debate at the City Hall, where I participated on the side of civil society, the unarmed majority. And strangely, on the other side, were not only leaders of armed groups, with Maxwell Kabad, this and that, and, you know, NPFL representatives and all of them there. There was also a voice on the ground. My good friend, Barney Sherman, who was then perceived as some lawyer doing things, was one of those who said, this is a public meeting, so, you know, but Barney said at that time, oh, you guys turn the thing over. Then it was Bumambo who was supposed to come in. And Bumambo had been working in his law firm, it was his friend. You just turn the thing over. The people, if they don't disarm, they don't trust you. That's why when Bumambo take over, they will disarm to him. After all, who are you guys who say you're talking for the people when some of you don't even have a stake in the ground? We, the one who have property, we have a right to be talking for the people. You know, he's not dead, he's a political leader. I'm saying to you, that's why I keep talking about interests. Some of the interests that brought people together were so narrow that sometimes they can forget that in the end what we wanted for you to practice law well and make proper money was for people not to have guns on their shoulder over your head. And this was and is one of the most intelligent, Harvard-trained persons who should have known that to opt for giving power to people without disarming wasn't going to give you the peace. But that's what he wanted for a limited purpose. At that time, his friend, his employee, Omanpo would have become the president. And his influence in the government would have been a little bit more than what it was at that time. It was a very limited objective. And I know he is a lot more sensible. I'm sure he's reflected on that, and today might not say the same thing.
Try to wrap up. Talking about the power sharing and taking us back to the experience. At the point in time, there was this disputed Soglo letter of the president of Conmany at the time, Lucifer Soglo, who was also the chairman of OU, I think, at the time. Reportedly wrote a letter, I think, of sort of like giving or suggesting that Mr. Taylor at the time be the head of state. And the letter was allegedly not written by President Soglo, but they allegedly carried the signature, and it is all this rumor that you were the one who discovered that the letter was a fraud. I mean, just to unmask some of these mysteries, can you, if you can remember the incident, can you just throw a little light on that whole Soglo letter thing?
But Commissioner, you hear Tipo, you can hear plenty of things. I have forgotten. No, you know, it just happened. Again, not because I'm any wiser. We had a very good team. As I said, there were guys, younger and stronger that time. You don't get tired easily. There was Rani Samukai, there was Abdullah Dukle, there were Lamini Wariti, a group of team. The team was just solid. We had a little bit more than the other people. And combined wisdom with a leader like Sawyer, we were able to predict. And when we see something, then we... So this letter came. And we were in Banks Apartment on Randall Street, I remember. And we're looking for why would Soglo do this? I had gone to see Soglo. I had carried messages to Soglo. And what he said to me in conversations did not tally with what the content of this document was. And there was something about, I don't even remember what it was. It was a very simple little stuff that made me to ask, well, how come this, maybe it was about a date or something, I really don't remember now. But then they say, go and find out. So I had this relationship with Gordon Somers, who was then the special representative of the UN Secretary General. He said, anytime I could call him, and he called me anytime. So 2 a.m. I called the man. I say, you brought a letter. And he brought it. But this is what we found. And we are sending a delegation to Soglo, and Dr. Dukle was being prepared to go. They say he speaks excellent French, and myself to go to Soglo. So then someone said, what was it? He saw it? He said, yes, I brought it. But I believe that it is true. He said, you believe it? Okay, we don't believe it. We want to go to Soglo. We're going to check it out. They had been the ambassador. His name is Ungabu. He was the ambassador of Benin in Cote d'Ivoire. He was the one to whom some of our friends, some of them are in Monrovia now, working for the NPFL, had gone and probably compromised him to write this letter, which they brought, gave to Gordon Somers. He, as I have met him subsequently, he genuinely believed if a letter came from the ambassador, it had to be true, and brought it, and now was about to act on it. And Dr. Sawyer, just to show that he said he didn't want to be an issue, that he was ready to step down once the ECOWAS said so. And so we were able to avert that. By this time, the matter got to Soglo. They recalled the ambassador, they threw him in jail. Today, ever since then, he's in the doldrums in Benin. He's not been seen in giving any public office since that time. I thought you were asking about the other fraud in the interpretation again involving the Soglo,
Yes, I
Where-
was asking about the two letters.
where we had gone and they had said that in the agreement, we signed this agreement. In the agreement, they said that the parties having committed themselves to disarmament would participate concomitant with disarmament, and they would participate in dividing cabinet post. Cabinet post. We said cabinet post is a cabinet minister, and the cabinet minister is the minister, not deputy minister, not assistant minister, not managing director. After Soglo explained this over and over, the ULIMO, then it wasn't ULIMO K and J, it was ULIMO. The NPFL, they went in the corner and wrote a document defining cabinet posts to include assistant ministers. So the other day when I heard one of our colleagues saying that when the coup took place they called ministers and he didn't go, I said, oh, but you the same one who said assistant minister was minister. But anyway, they did a fraudulent document, divided the positions, everything, all the thing they call, what they call it, that they call important positions. They did it and signed on it and said that it had been endorsed by Soglo. So I thought it was one of the things. I mean, we fought it. Dr. Sawyer said, look, everybody don't understand. Even people who should understand better, educated people among us, lawyers who should be on our side, are now saying we are the problem. So whatever these people put down, you're just let it go. I am tired. That's how we let it go. And they divided the positions, but it did not end there because they were not satisfied. They still realized that somebody had more than the other. The issue of whether they didn't like Taylor, didn't like Roma, or didn't like this other person did not arise. It was about dividing the little resources that existed. And I'm sure many of them know this. They had nothing to do with revolution. They had nothing to do with transformation.
Thank you. My last question to wrap up my two questions. My first question is a double-decker question. My first question and my last question. One, what do you know about the Black Beret, the formation of the Black Beret, and what part did you play in it, if you play any part? Two, what do you know about the formation of the Nimba Defense Force, whose spokesperson was Corbett Ryan, son of the late David Ryan, who was allegedly murdered by NPFL forces? That's my first question. My last question, there have been several arguments around the intentions of the progressives at the time when you advocated for change, social justice, and what have you. And that argument surrounds the timing of your advocacy. Some people are of the opinion that the timing it was ill-timed, that the population was not ready for the kind of change that we were pushing. You yourselves were not ready. The country was not ready, and also some of the language you use when you advocate for change provoked in the minds of people violence, and so some people want to believe that, well, quote unquote, you guys were agitators, that you agitated the situation that eventually led to the events of the 1980 coup and other events in the country's history. I would just like you to comment on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner. Nimba Defense Force, I don't know. I only heard on the radio. I got to know Capet Duane and saw him at one of the peace meetings. Indeed, he was angry, but he wasn't the type of angry. He didn't look, and he seemed like a very sober fellow. I think it wasn't really anything that went into full activity from what I know. I think, I hope I'm wrong, that probably it was set up since armed groups were participating in the negotiations and the sharing of the pie. Maybe that was why it was being set up, but it wasn't anything that we associated with. The Black Berets. The Black Berets, again, I was advised on the peace process, and I wasn't in the security department, and so I did not participate in the discussions for the founding of the Black Berets. What I do know is that we had an understanding, a decision, that we must form a group, because the Nigerians, the Guineans, the Sierra Leoneans, the others, in the meantime, Sierra Leone was already engrossing its own activities. They had come under fire. So the Sierra Leone soldiers were back home. The view was that we Liberians needed to help to fight for ourselves. How come we just sit down and want Nigerian boys and girls to die? I mean, can't we organize in a small way something that would defend us, working under the command of ECOWAS? It was from there that a decision was made, and it was a West African decision. It wasn't just the interim government, that there must be this force. So there was financial support for it that came from Nigeria. There was the training area which Guinea provided, because Guinea is close to us, and the Guinean base had experience in guerrilla warfare and the various kind of training that would be able to fight against any threat of invasion. And the threats were always present, that Monrovia would be attacked anytime. So conscientious young men and women were being recruited. In fact, it was open that people should recommend, but you recommend and people must know who that is, that they will have a responsibility. I don't know the number, but these young men went for training, and on the eve, it was as if it was by just divine intervention. These young men had just been returned to Monrovia when the octopus occurred in October, when Taylor's forces attacked. When that attack engulfed the NPFL, the INPFL offices, the base. And, I'm telling you, when this is in October, and I said to you in June, in that year, in June, when we carried the message to Mr. Johnson, one of the things he said to me in private was that he was happy that I wasn't afraid because of what he had done to some advisors who had gone there. He tied them and gave them this drug and this alcohol and all of that, that many people were afraid to go on his base. That at a camp, that means I have a good heart. And he said, you hear me every day cussing Sawyer, and you used to come in the car with a bullhorn on Broad Street, go up Salvatore's under the Duco there and stand there with a bullhorn and cuss Sawyer, hey ma, hey pa, and everybody, the interim government. The ECOMOB soldiers will come and say, should we arrest this man? They say, no, you leave him alone. Sawyer will say, but end of my mind, because I'm not vexed, I didn't hear him. Somebody else heard, so that's all right. Now, while going through this, he kept talking about the black berets, that the black berets were set up to kill him. But then he said, I'm sure Sawyer is afraid because he's hearing that me and Taylor are doing business. That people from Taylor's base were coming to INPFL base. They were there in their numbers. They were coming gradually. He said to me, I'm the same one who cut dough. He said, and I made dough. I went to him. I drew him until I got hold of him. He said, me, I will be the one to catch Taylor. I get making people to come so he can feel comfortable, so he can come to my base. Then he will say he will overthrow you because he believed I'm against you people from the interim government. That was what he said was his game. And that's how come all the so many NPFL people came there and were making the deals with his commanders until Octopus came. Now, I want to know what the explanation is today. How come? It was so easy. They were there. And all these people, Vanny, and what the other gentleman who was in the legislature with us, all of them were on the base. They joined. You know? They joined him. He was worried about the black beret. He just wanted to assure us that whatever you have for the black berets, don't think that I am your enemy, because whatever I'm doing is to help you in the end. I will be the one to arrest Taylor. That's what I know. So the black berets came, and I said it was as if it was divine presence. It was those people. If you recall, General Bakut, under the influence of Carter, Jimmy Carter, had led ECOMOG to withdraw its heavy machinery and even send some troops back. Most of ECOMOG, a lot of ECOMOG troops, Nigerian troops, had gone back with their machinery. So the town was there when General Lorry was sent. As he was landing, Octopus was underway from 4 points. There was no way we could have survived. But for those boys, when they landed on the ground and began to lead the few ECOMOG people that were on the ground before the Nigerians began to send back troops and machinery, if it had not been for those ECOMOG people, those black berets, we would have had a near catastrophe. And I say, hats off to them. I recall at that time, my job was to continue to make peace. And the only radio station that was working was KISS FM, was some Radio Liberia, whatever, Radio Liberia International. We had no fuel, we had nothing. So there was no message from the interim government to tell the population. So everything you heard was coming from those people. And they were saying, everybody is giving up, come to Sports Commission, go to Newport Street Place and all of that. But for the intelligence of the black berets, because the boys will go to those places and come back and say it's not true, nobody is there, the NPFL is not there. It was so believing for them that I believe the Americans believe it. Because on one of those days, I carry a message to the American embassy. And as I got in, I was told, have you come with the surrender? We're ready to help you. And I said, surrender? No, we're not surrendering. He said, what are you depending on? You don't have anything. The guys are going to cross the bridge any minute from our reports. But that's another story. On the issue of the progressives and the language, again, I have told you that there was a Whig superstructure called the Whig Party government. There were people within that government that wanted change. They were not given an opportunity for that to be affected. They were young people. I know friends like David Jala. There's a number of them were in the Shaw. These were the young thugs within who had a certain vision about the future. They wanted a certain change. There were those who felt if you were to make Jackson Doe, just Jackson Doe, give him an opportunity, it will obviate some of the arguments that come from some other quarters. But the hard heads, the conservative arm of the True Party didn't want to hear that. And so the things that were called progressive language were just simple sense. For example, to say that you cannot use property clause to vote, because throughout you've been holding elections and electing your people without them showing their property clause, showing their property ownership. Why are you lying? Now when Sawyer wants to run for mayor, you say property clause. That's not, it doesn't make sense. So Stauber saw that it was right. What is progressive about that? It's common sense, isn't it? To say that let us help and expand, create opportunities so that there will be no more youth coming down to Monrovia to stay in Newtown and West Point and Doe community, what is now called Doe Community, Claratown, who don't have job and be ready by any whistle that blows. If you don't want that, then create opportunities. Let us spread the educational opportunities. Let us reduce the cost on the children. The money we spend on one child on government scholarship to go to England, to primary school. There are many of the kids, there are many people in this town. Some of them are here today. They didn't make them any better young men and women to go to primary school in England and pay all that money when 1 year's tuition would have built a school and maintain the school and the faculty in Tigrican Public School. And probably you wouldn't have me coming to Monrovia and talking. I probably would be there being a little teacher and happy. You know, you probably wouldn't have had a door who will leave the tools on and come to Monrovia to come and make a coup. What is progressive about that? It is just simple sense. And not to see it and not to even associate with it, we have a problem. Have you seen when others are claiming ownership of in the cause of the people? Talbot, I just read Talbot's letter. He signed it in the cause of the people. Did you hear that? Of course Talbot said that because he had foresight. He was a progressive. Mr. Talbot wrote. He wrote for membership of the movement for justice in Africa. He wrote and was admitted into membership because he believed that the struggle for national liberation was the right thing to do, and we needed to support the MPLA, to support the PAIGC, to support Frelimo, and support the ANC and PAC against apartheid. So he made himself a member. Others didn't see it because they didn't understand. Not because they were wicked. No, I never look at them as wicked. It just happened that many of them just had no understanding and they were stuck. They were stuck in their little corners and never could see the bigger picture.
Okay, I know I said was my last question, but pardon me, you just triggered a question when you spoke of the game that Mr. Johnson told you all he was playing with you. He was playing with Taylor, trying to lure Taylor to Monrovia, or to lure Taylor on his base, to capture Taylor. Is it true, or would you know whether for sure that at that time Mr. Johnson had about 500 of the NPFF fighters who had come to his base for the purpose of, I think, overrunning Monrovia or whatsoever, but you say he said he was playing a game with Taylor. Now, if you guys knew about it at all, did you at any time meet with Johnson or discuss with him? Did you meet with any of these emissaries who came from Mr. Taylor's held territory to discuss with him? And if so, wasn't that a very dangerous game, deadly game for the Liberians, especially those who lived in this enclave of Monrovia?
No, it was dangerous. I'm saying to you that we had an extraordinary, with a small group that we were. Kesseley, Dr. Kesseley was a minister of LA part, right? I don't remember the exact. But I'm just saying, at a given point, you had Dr. Kesseley as Minister of Defense. He had created a Defense Intelligence Unit. He had these young assistants with Rani Samukai, Fumba Sherry Soliv, the one that got Mad Dog, Madison Topa, guys who graduate from West Point in the United States. Many of them had exceptional experience. Young, but they put together an intelligence that was so sharp. Then it was that's why the BlackBerry was so important. And so Mr. Johnson wanted to allay our fears. Now whether he was playing game with us or with Mr. Taylor, but at least he told me by June that whatever he was doing wasn't meant for us. But he certainly was afraid of the BlackBerries.
But did you know he had like almost 500?
The intelligence reported that every time there were people on Prince Johnson's base, there were increasing numbers of people. These guys had collected our information. When we went to Taylor, on the other hand, when I carried the message to Taylor with Mrs. Luvian Ash Thompson, Taylor called me on the side and said, look, Conmany, you know, I've always admired you. You are a very brilliant fellow. If we could get a few of you from around that soil, we know that then interim government of Monrovia will collapse. I don't know what you're doing in the same town with Prince Johnson. He said that man is a devil. The man, if you eaten with him, you got to have a very, very long spoon. Because I hope you don't sit there and trust anything he tell you, because he's vicious. That's what he said. So on the two sides, we were collecting intelligence, and the only thing we had was to develop our own security. That when they come in, we must not lie down and die. We will put up a resistance. The Nigerian boys did not know the corners of the town, but our boys that were coming back as BlackBerries will show them. And they didn't come with guns. The agreement with ECOMOG and the West Africans was that they would give them guns when they needed. So they will get their supply as per need, on the need basis. And I can tell you, they performed. They certainly performed. When I made a big mouth at the American embassy and said we're not giving up, I was relying on them.
Thank you very much.